Hi, welcome again to another lecture in the course of short story. And today we are going to have a study, an analysis, a look at another amazing short story by Edgar Allan Poe, The Black Cat, which I really admire. Look, this genre of Gothic fiction is really amazing. It opens up a very new innovative and creative horizon in literature. This type of genre is very interesting. It's relatively new in the world of literature. It appeared in the 18th and 19th century. So it's really amazing to have a Gothic short story here today by Edgar Allan Poe. So, as I told you in the previous lecture, that please go and read the text itself. The Black Cat, you should read the text itself. Nothing will replace the importance and the significance of the text itself. Nothing will take the place of the text itself. You should go and read the text because it gives you an overall view and understanding of the text. Reading the text itself might be much better than reading maybe 100 pages on the same story, criticizing and reviewing that story. So reading the text is of great importance. So please pause the lecture right now, right here. Go and read the short story. It's not a very long story. You can read it within 30 minutes or less and come back here. Okay, so pause it and go. Okay, thank you for reading the text. Let's move on in our lecture. So, just like let's take a plot summary here. The story's narrator is an animal lover who, as he descends into alcoholism and perverse violence, begins mistreating his wife and his black cat Plato. When Plato attacks him in self-defense one night, he seizes the cat in a fury, cuts out one of its eyes, and hangs it. That night, a fire destroys his house, leaving him in dire poverty. He later adopts a one-eyed black cat that he finds at a low-life tavern. But after he nearly trips on the cat, he attempts to kill it too. When his wife intervenes, he kills her instead and calmly conceals her in a wall. In the end, the black cat reveals the narrator's crime to the police. So this is a very short summary on the short story on the black cat. It's really interesting. Uh, this in fact reminds me of Stephen King's late novel written I think in 1992. The title is The Pet Cemetery. It's amazing, and it was dramatized. It was converted into a movie in 2019. You should go and watch the movie. It's amazing. It's one of the best Gothic movies that you will watch in your entire life. It's so scholarly. It's so beautiful. So please go and watch that movie. This in fact reminds me of that movie, the appearance of the cat, and how it appears again as a double, like it comes back from death and so on. So it's very similar in the cat story. Okay. But of course, I believe, according to my understanding, according to my reading, the Pet Cemetery is much more mature and scholarly in this respect when we talk about Gothic. So, what is Gothic tradition? What is a Gothic genre? What is a Gothic text? The Gothic, a literary movement that focused on ruin, decay, death, terror, and chaos, and privileged irrationality and passion over rationality and reason, grew in response to the historical, sociological, psychological, and political context of the late 18th and early 19th centuries. So, the Gothic tradition, it appeared at the end of the 18th and in the beginning of the 19th centuries. of course, it has a very long tradition. It has its own socio-political, historical context that gave rise to this type of genre. Uh, I have in my channel, I have a course on Gothic fiction, so please you can go and watch the introduction lectures on this genre. You will know much better than this short introduction on Gothic fiction. Go and watch those lectures. You have a better understanding of. You will have a better understanding of Gothic fiction. So Gothic means it's about irrationality. It's about chaos. It's about death, decay, terror. It's about horror. It's about freaking out. And mostly it's about irrationality over rationality. Uh, so this is the general definition of Gothic tradition, and of course it has a very long story uh, behind the appearance of Gothic fiction. So the Black Cat belongs to this Gothic tradition. As for the characters of this short story, we have some interesting characters. We have the unnamed narrator. The narrator is another of Poe's unnamed and unreliable men driven to madness. All we really know about him, if his word can be trusted, that is that he has enjoyed a lifetime love of animals, and that the animals have uh, reciprocated this love. The narrator does make clear what it is about animals that inspires in him a higher level of love and respect. He particularly admires the loyalty and perception. In other words, if an animal remains loyal to you, you must be a good person, which should bring into question the character of any person whose pet begins to exhibit disloyal behavior. So the unnamed narrator. By the way, this short story has its first person narrator. I forgot to mention in the slides, so please take note that the type of narrator here is the first person narrator, which, as I told you in the previous lectures, that this type of narrator cannot be trusted. And even in the beginning of the short story, even the narrator tells us that I don't care, I'm not sure that whether you believe in my story or not, whether you believe my words or the events in the story or not. So again, even the narrator himself makes confession that I might not be reliable in narrating the story. So here we have this unnamed narrator who is the focus and the center of this short story. And as for the conflict here, the conflicts are ignited by the narrator himself, and he seems to be the protagonist. He is the anti-hero of this story. We have hero, we have anti-hero. So the narrator himself here is the anti-hero, which is the opposite of hero. He is not the antagonist. He is still the protagonist, but he is anti-hero. He is weak. He is psychologically weak. He does not have those characteristics of a hero, that he is perfect, that he knows everything, that he is so strong. He is not of that type of heroes. So he is anti-hero. He is indecisive. He is so weak. He cannot take his correct decisions and so on. So here we have the unnamed narrator. He is the focus, the center of the story. We have also the narrator's wife. Not much information is provided about the narrator's wife other than that she shares his love of animals. We do learn that she might be more superstitious than he is, since she is fond of mentioning the belief that cats and witches are inextricably linked. Of course, this information arrives courtesy of a narrator that is not entirely trustworthy, and even he is careful to assert that just because she mentions this superstition doesn't necessarily mean she believes it. Ultimately, it is the narrator that seems to possess a deeper belief in supernatural explanations. One thing is for certain: the wife is willing to intrude on behalf of animals when in danger, even if that danger is her husband. So here, as for the wife, she represents the logical, the rational side of the story. She tries to be the correcting factor in the story. The man, the narrator, he is alcoholic, he is indecisive, he doesn't have any rationality. On the other side, we have this female, this wife, this woman. She is so rational. She tries to correct things. She tries to put, to bring back the events and the story into the right trail. So she is the only positive character here, which finally dies, of course. This is something very typical in Gothic fiction, that we have the good guys, they finally die, and they finally face their fate, their death, in such stories. We have Plato. Plato is the name of the cat, by the way. Plato is the black cat that joins the goldfish, rabbit, duck, birds, and monkey in the menageries of pets that narrator and his wife invite into their home. The close bond between cat and owner even manages to initially shield the cat from the abusive effects of the owner, effects that were already affecting the man's relationship with his other pets and his wife. The passage of time and the rise of addiction tolerance eventually takes their toll, however, resulting in Plato first losing an eye and the narrator's hand before losing his life at the end of a noose. So, Plato represents that side of the dark world. Plato belongs to the Gothic world of supernatural beings, as if that black cat is a supernatural being. It is not a normal animal. It doesn't belong to this world. It belongs to the world, to the underworld. By the way, Plato is the name of the king of the underworld. It's a reference to that mythology of the Roman mythology, Roman and Greek mythologies. So he is the king of the underworld, and of course, the black cat normally in local superstitions, the black cat is perceived as a demon, as like a witch, as some fallen angel, okay, the bad angels. So Plato has those references, those implications in this story. We have also the second black cat, following rather quickly upon the death of Plato and an unexplained fire that destroys the narrator's home. A second black cat enters the narrative. This cat remains nameless, like the narrator. It is almost identical to Plato, right down to having only one eye, but it has one distinguishing difference: a patch of white fur covering almost its entire breast. The lack of an actual name indicates the emotionless connection between it and the narrator that claims to be such an animal lover. So the second black cat, it is like the coming back of Plato from death. It is like the revival. It's like the resurrection of the black cat. It's like coming back from death, and like taking revenge of its death. This is a very typical norm and tradition in Gothic fiction: the coming back of death, seeking revenge. So the black cat, the second black cat, the second coming of the cat, is like resurrecting from death, seeking revenge for its first death. Of course, we are not sure whether it is the same first black cat, but it has the same identical characteristics of that one lost eye and the same fur, the same features and characteristics. So here we have the coming back from death. It's like that. As for the themes, we have supernatural beliefs. The theme of supernatural elements pervades this story. The title itself suggests supernatural elements, for there are various superstitions regarding the bad luck that a black cat allegedly brings. The events that followed the hanging of Plato can be attributed to supernatural explanations. for it is a common belief that a black cat brings bad luck. Of course, here we have supernatural beliefs, as we said, is part of Gothic fiction. Supernatural beings, supernatural beliefs. These belong to Gothic fiction, and we have those superstitions that revolve around black cats. It's like a bad omen, bad luck. It's like demon walking, and we should get rid of those that black cats. So we have the appearance of supernatural beliefs here. We have also the theme of guilt. The narrator's guilt is what brought the black cat back to haunt him. The cat presents his guilt. As the narrator became more guilty, the cat became more realistic. The narrative shows that guilt is a key factor in man's descent into madness, yet also a vital part of what keeps us human. Again, guilt, the theme of guilt here is so present. It's one of the dominant forces in this short story. The guilt that followed up the killing of the cat, the destroying the cat's eye, and so on. So the guilt here is so dominant and controlling here in this short story. Again, guilt is one of the characteristics of Gothic fiction. The divided self. The narrator experienced a fragmented, divided self. He vacillated between sanity and insanity, between fear and horror of the cat and the impulse to act. He had nightmares, drunken stupors, and paroxysms of rage and despair. He killed his cat and then desired another one. He felt poorly for his long-suffering wife, but murdered her without a thought. So again, the divided self here is so apparent. We have this indecisiveness of the character of the narrator, and he doesn't have that power to take his decisions rationally. So again here, the insanity, fear, horror is so dominant in this short story and is so apparent. As for the symbols here, premature burial. Prior to the technological revolution in medicine and advancements in the art of embalming, the fear of being buried alive due to being misconstrued as dead was very real. As a result, stories of premature burial abound throughout literature and throughout Poe's story. Outright death brings with it a kind of finality and release from the moral world. Burial alive, in contrast, condemns one to a kind of liminal space between the realms of the living and the dead. So, the premature burial of in this short story, it has its very long story in that society. Previously, the medical fields were not so advanced, and that's why they did not have that ability to diagnose the death of characters, of people, truly. That's why many people were buried alive. They thought that they were dead, so their relatives, their friends, bury them alive, thinking that they are really dead, and they wake up in their graves. Just I've heard some stories that they mention in history books that there are so many. One of the famous figures in the Arabic culture, okay, and Arabic history, that he was like a prince who died, and at night he woke up in his grave and again died out of fear. So such events and such mistakes happened so much before the advancement of medical fields. So again, here we have the premature burial, which is a mixture between this world and the next world. We have this, mixture. We have this intermingling of death and life in this symbol. we have the symbol of eyes. As a symbol, eyes, especially when contemplated from the perspective of paranoid narrator, represent the kind of existential persecution that comes from knowing that one is being observed, yet being unable to locate the observer or do anything to escape their gaze. So here the problem of eyes is so horrific. It's like the gaze. Even in psychoanalysis, we have the problem of the gaze, that the other is always gazing at you, and we do not know what the other wants from us through that gaze. So the eye represents the gaze from the unknown source. That gives us fear, that gives us some uneasiness, that gives us some fear and horror when we find out that someone is really gazing at us, when we cannot identify the source of that gaze. And we have the double. The appearance of the second cat functions as the double of the plateau. The double in Gothic fiction is a symbol of death or return from death. The double here is real interesting. It's a very tricky and innovative idea that Poe created in his short story. The double in Gothic fiction, we have so many doubles that appear in Gothic fiction, in Gothic movies, like a recent movie called Us. It's amazing. It represents the idea of double in a perfect way. We have also the movie called Mirrors. It also encounters, and it's about the idea of double and how it can destroy one's life. So the double always signifies death. It's like taking your place. It's very uncanny when you look at yourself in the mirror. It's your double looking at you, looking back at you. So it's really a horrifying idea to have this double in short stories.